And if Israel breaks them, they are as culpable as Hamas or
did
anybody
Netanyahu
else.
commit war crime? Did Netanyahu commit war crimes trying to fight this war when you have Hamas embedded in
I believe he may well have done, yes. I do believe that.
What else is he going to do then? Not fight?
No, you can fight, but you have to abide by the rules of war.
Well,
Before we get into this, remember when this conversation happened. October 14th, 2025. This is an old clip we're revisiting because sometimes the best way to understand political propaganda is to go back and listen to what people were confidently telling audiences at the time. And Brandon Tatum was making a very familiar argument. Hamas operates among civilians, Israel gives warnings, Israel allows aid. Therefore, what else is Israel supposed to do? But there's a massive problem with that argument. The existence of Hamas does not erase Palestinian civilians, and it does not erase the laws governing war. What's even more interesting is that Piers Morgan, while defending Israel's right to fight Hamas, eventually admits something that seriously undercuts the idea that Israel automatically gets a pass. He says Netanyahu may well have committed war crimes, and then the conversation gets even more revealing when they start arguing about whether what happened in Gaza could be called genocide. So we're going back to this October 2025 debate and examining the arguments they were making at that moment. Because the receipts matter. I'm Neil. This is the honest perspective. When powerful people make excuses for powerful governments, we go back to the record. Let's get into it.
Brandon, let me bring you in here. There's been an interesting split in Trump's support. The base, it seems to me, the MAGA base is increasingly anti-Israel. We see that with Tucker Carlson, with Candace Owens and others. Others are very much pro-Israel, but there's a real split there. What's that about?
Well, let me correct you on that. I don't think it's anti-Israel. A lot of it's anti-Semitic. I mean, people are losing their minds. And I almost had a stroke listening to the capitulation to the foolery in Gaza and Israel. Israel don't owe them anything. Why are we confused about this? They came over and they slaughtered all these people. They took people hostage. They don't owe them nothing. They could starve them to death if they wanted to. That's their decision, in my personal opinion, because they're reasonable. They send out leaflets and the lies about the media. They don't allow journalists in. Where's all this propaganda coming from?
They don't allow them in.
I see videos of kids. I see buildings coming down. Where's all this coming from?
They don't allow
propaganda.
It. Look.
Well, listen, but
Brandon,
it's a real
it is actually a fact they don't allow journalists in.
No, but
unless you are a friendly journalist embedded with the IDF, you're not allowed in.
It's inconsequential. Because
it's not though, is it? Because how do we know the truth?
I believe it's inconsequential. You know the truth. You see the propaganda coming out of Gaza. You see, and then journalists get killed and people are complaining.
Propaganda is not true.
And people complain.
I see propaganda on all sides, and in my experience of propaganda in war, the only way.
What is the truth?
But hang on, Brandon.
We will find out.
The only way, Brandon, the only way to counter propaganda from all sides in a war, because it comes from all sides, the only way is to allow independent journalists to do their jobs.
They don't do their job in America. So they lie every day in America. So I don't really care about that. At the end of the day, we will see now that the war is over.
Let's talk about people getting $7,000 a post.
Let me finish,
to lie.
young lady. Let me finish. And I will give you a chance to speak. Let me finish. Saying is that I think it's inconsequential. I think people are jumping. They don't have to feed these people. They could have starved them to death if they wanted to, but they didn't.
Well, that would be a war crime.
They were kept. You could say it's a war crime anyway. Who cares?
No, I'm not saying it would be a war crime.
Innocent people in Israel.
Yeah, but Brandon, it would be a war crime.
You could say it doesn't matter. They killed all these people.
It does matter.
Hamas is embedding.
Brandon, it matters.
Hamas is embedding themselves in the population.
Yeah, Hamas are disgusting. Hamas are disgusting, and they commit endless war crimes.
But what do you expect them to do, Piers?
Yeah, but
how do you fight a war?
I'm sorry,
when they're embedded in the people.
Sorry, but there are international rules relating to warfare.
And notice the logic being used here. Because Hamas is embedded among civilians, we're supposed to accept that civilian deaths are somehow inevitable, almost as if the presence of Hamas removes Israel's responsibility. But that's not how the laws of war work. If an armed group deliberately operates around civilians, that's a serious problem. But it doesn't give the opposing military a blank check. You don't get to say, they're hiding among civilians, therefore anything we do is justified. That's exactly why rules of warfare exist. And what's about to happen is important, because Piers doesn't simply say Israel has no right to fight Hamas. He asks the much more uncomfortable question. Can Israel fight Hamas and still violate international law? Listen to his answer.
And if Israel breaks them, they are as culpable as Hamas or
did
anybody
Netanyahu
else.
commit war crime? Did Netanyahu commit war crimes trying to fight this war when you have Hamas embedded in with
I
the
believe
people?
he may well have done, yes. I do believe that.
What else is he going to do then? Not fight?
No, you can fight, but you have to abide by the rules of war.
Well, what are you going to do?
Well, this is why we have
the rules
yeah,
of
but
the war.
Brandon,
Nobody's answering his question.
This is why we had the Geneva.
This
This is why we had the Geneva Convention set up after
Well,
World War II.
Then?
Because
what do you do then?
Brandon, after World War II, they set up a Geneva Convention because the world concluded that a lot of the stuff that went on in World War II simply crossed a line, and therefore, for future wars and conflicts, you had to have rules of engagement recognized by the international community. And if you don't have those, then anything goes, that anyone can do anything. And you, I'm sure, would agree with me that way insanity lies, right? And total mayhem.
I agree, Piers.
There it is. That's the contradiction. The argument started with Hamas is embedded among civilians. But even Piers, in this October 2025 discussion, acknowledges that doesn't answer the legal question. You can fight Hamas, but you still have to follow the rules. And that's the part that gets conveniently forgotten whenever people want to turn October 7th into a permanent justification for everything that followed. Hamas's crimes don't erase Israel's obligations, and Palestinian civilians don't become legitimate targets because Hamas operates among them. You can condemn Hamas and condemn Israeli violations. In fact, if you actually believe in universal human rights, that's the only consistent position. But then this conversation gets even more revealing, because Brandon moves from the laws of war to an argument about genocide that can actually be tested against the definition of genocide itself.
Let me bring Brandon in here. Brandon.
Okay, you can't answer the question that you tried to ask me.
I want everybody to get a chance. This young lady is clearly a propagandist. She will not deny or will not say that Hamas is a terrorist organization and they killed innocent people. And then she wants Hamas to be fighting and killing innocent people. And then when Israel come back and whoop their socks off, she act like it's a genocide. They haven't been committing a genocide. I don't know what world you live in or any other person that's living in that think this is a genocide. You don't feed people in a genocide. You don't provide aid in a genocide. The population doesn't grow during a genocide. 75 years, the population has grown. What are you saying? Are you guys smoking or what? 75 years, the population has grown. That's not a genocide.
That's not what the definition of genocide. Could you even define genocide? You clearly can't even define genocide.
Well, I tell you what.
Name another genocide.
Let me just say something. The reality, and I've learned this by talking to genocide scholars, is that no country or state has ever been found guilty of waging a genocide. I was surprised by that. I didn't know that. The bar for a genocide is extremely high. And that's why, so far, no country has ever been found guilty or convicted of committing or waging a genocide. I didn't know that before this war broke out, but I do know that now. So the bar is very, very high for even in Rwanda. They did not, in the end, classify that as a genocide. We might have a view that that's wrong, but my view of what's happened in Israel is that if you believe people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, they were operating on a basis of ethnic cleansing, seizing the opportunity created by this appalling attack to actually expel Palestinians, kick them out of their homes and take their land. That's ethnic cleansing, but I wouldn't categorize that as a genocide, which is how many people have tried to make me call it. But that's my explanation.
And this is exactly why going back to old political clips matters. Because now we can separate the confidence of the argument from the actual substance of the argument. Brandon's claim was basically, the Palestinian population grew, therefore this cannot be genocide. But that's not the legal definition. The Genocide Convention doesn't say a population has to shrink before genocide can exist. It focuses on specific acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a protected national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Those acts include killing, causing serious bodily or mental harm, and deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. So population growth doesn't settle the question. It doesn't prove genocide. But it certainly doesn't disprove it either. Then we get to Piers' claim that no country or state has ever been found guilty of genocide. That statement also needed much more precision. The International Court of Justice's 2007 judgment concerning the Srebrenica genocide found that Serbia violated its obligation to prevent genocide. The court did not find Serbia itself responsible for committing the genocide, which is precisely why these legal questions require careful language rather than television sound bites. And that same caution applies to Gaza. The ICJ had not issued a final judgment declaring Israel guilty of genocide, but it had already taken the allegations seriously enough to issue provisional measures under the Genocide Convention. So when we revisit this October 2025 conversation, the lesson isn't that every question had already been legally settled. The lesson is that some very confident arguments were much weaker than they sounded. Hamas is embedded among civilians. That doesn't erase the laws of war. The population grew. That doesn't answer the legal definition of genocide. And there's no genocide because no state has ever been convicted is not a substitute for actually examining the evidence. This is what accountability looks like. You don't have to defend Hamas to criticize Israel. You don't have to deny October 7th to care about Palestinian civilians. And you don't have to wait for a final court judgment before demanding that allegations of war crimes and violations of international law be investigated seriously. Human rights aren't supposed to depend on which government you're defending. That's the standard I want to see applied consistently. Because when we go back to the tape, we can see exactly what people were saying before the next news cycle arrived and everyone moved on. Keep the receipts, follow the evidence, and never confuse confidence with truth. If you believe powerful governments should face the same standards they demand from everyone else, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. I'm Neil. Keep questioning the powerful. Keep defending human dignity. That's The Honest Perspective, and that's where I'll leave you.